My name is Arthur Penhaligon, and I came to the Serpent's tooth to disappear. It's an old lie we tell ourselves, we who run to the edges of the world. We say we seek solitude, but what we really seek is a silence loud enough to drown out the noise in our own heads. For 30 years, I'd been an archivist, a man who lived in the dusty quiet of other people's pasts. A failed marriage and a life lived in monochrome sent me searching for a different kind of quiet, one filled with the roar of the sea and the cry of gulls. The Serpent's tooth was a splinter of granite clawing its way out of the sea 10 miles off the coast. The lighthouse itself was a Victorian relic, a proud stone tower that had defied a century of storms. My job was simple: keep the light burning, report the weather, and maintain the log. It was a life of routine, a metronome set against the chaotic rhythm of the waves. The solitude was a balm. Days bled into weeks. The mainland became a rumour, a smudge of distant lights on a clear night. My world shrank to the circular rooms of the tower, the cast-iron spiral staircase, and the magnificent lantern room with its colossal Fresnel lens, a crystalline god that turned my humble electricity into a life-saving star. My only real link to the outside world, besides a modern satellite phone for emergencies, was a beautiful, archaic Marconi radio set in the watchroom. It was a museum piece, all polished brass and bakelite knobs, but the old keeper, a crusty sea dog named Finlay, had shown me it still worked. "Picks up things the new stuff misses," he'd grunted, his eyes twinkling. The sea holds onto sounds, you see. Sometimes they just need an old ear to listen. I dismissed it as romantic nonsense. The first time I heard it, I was 3 months into my post. A thick, wet fog had descended, a featureless grey wall that swallowed the world. The foghorn began its mournful, two-toned lament. I was in the watchroom, making a cup of tea, the silence punctuated only by the drone of the horn and the hiss of the kettle. I fiddled with the Marconi, turning the large dial, letting the static wash over me. And then, through the crackle, a voice. Faint, laced with static, like a fly trapped in amber. Mayday, May, Lament, struck the fangs. It was gone as quickly as it came. I froze, my hand hovering over the dial. It sounded like a distress call. The Fangs was the local name for the treacherous reef just north of the lighthouse. I grabbed the modern VHF radio and hailed the Coast Guard, my heart thumping. I relayed what I'd heard. The response was polite, professional, and utterly dismissive. There were no active distress calls. No vessels were reported in the area. They suggested it was a stray signal, maybe a ham radio enthusiast playing a prank. I felt foolish, a landlubber spooked by shadows. I logged it as an anomaly and tried to forget. But the sea, as Finlay said, holds onto sounds. A week later, the fog returned, thicker this time, pressing against the lantern room glass like a living entity. And with it, the voice returned. I was ready for it, hunched over the Marconi set. "Mayday, Mayday. This is the steamship Siren's Lament. We have struck the Fangs. Position, unclear. The fog is too thick. We are taking on water fast. The hull is..." God, the noise. The transmission was clearer this time. The man's voice was clipped, British, filled with a rising panic that felt chillingly real. Siren's Lament. The name tickled a memory. I left the radio hissing and descended to the small library on the second floor. There, in a heavy, leather-bound book titled A History of Coastal Wrecks, I found it. The Siren's Lament, a cargo steamer bound for Boston, foundered in a dense fog on the night of November 12, 1923. The ship struck the Serpent's fangs and sank with all 28 hands. No survivors. The wreck was never precisely located. 100 years ago. A cold dread, heavier than the fog outside, settled in my gut. This wasn't a prank. This was impossible. I spent the rest of the night convincing myself of rational explanations. A complex atmospheric phenomenon. A solar flare causing a temporal echo in the ionosphere. I wrote down phrases that sounded scientific. Anything to keep the sheer, illogical terror at bay. The calls became a nightly ritual, tethered to the arrival of the fog. Every evening, I'd find myself drawn to the Marconi set, a reluctant priest attending a ghostly mass. The transmission grew longer, more detailed. I began to recognize the voice, which I mentally named the captain. I heard other sounds behind him now, the shouts of other men, the sickening groan of tortured metal, the roar of the sea pouring into the ship's guts. One night, a new sound surfaced beneath the chaos. A low, resonant thrumming. It wasn't the rhythmic chug of a steam engine. It was deeper, more organic, a vibration I felt in my teeth. It was a sound that didn't belong. The captain's broadcast began to change. It was no longer a loop. It felt interactive. Mayday, we see a light, a single light to the southwest. We are trying to steer towards it. We are approximately 2 miles off the light. My blood ran cold. The Serpent's tooth was the only light for 50 miles. He was talking about me, about my light. The call was no longer a static echo from the past. It was a real-time event, a ghost ship navigating by my beacon. I started a new logbook, a secret one. I chronicled every transmission, every detail. My official log remained pristine, filled with weather reports and maintenance checks. To the outside world, I was Arthur Penhaligon, dependable keeper. In private, I was a man losing his grip, a chronicler of an event that couldn't be happening. My sanity began to fray at the edges. I'd be in the lantern room, cleaning the lens, and swear I'd hear a ship's bell tolling on the wind, a sound distinct from the foghorn. I'd stare into the grey abyss of the fog for hours, my eyes straining to see the silhouette of a mast, the glow of a porthole. The isolation I had once cherished was now a suffocating torment. I was the sole audience for a century-old tragedy that refused to end. Driven by a desperate need for answers, I searched the lighthouse from top to bottom. In a dusty sea chest in the storage room, tucked beneath moldy spare blankets, I found what I was looking for. The personal logbook of a previous keeper, a man named Thomas Abernathy, dated 1922 to 1923. His handwriting started neat and clinical, much like my own. He wrote of storms and seabirds and the quiet satisfaction of the work. Then, in the autumn of 1923, the tone shifted. October 28th, 1923. A peculiar signal on the Marconi tonight. A garbled voice. Most strange. November 5th, 1923. The voice returns with the fog. It speaks of a ship in distress, but there is no ship. I have swept the horizon with the glasses all day. The sea is empty. My hands trembled as I read on. Abernathy's journey mirrored my own. The confusion, the rationalization, the dawning horror. But his entries went further. November 10th, 1923. It is not just a voice. There is another sound now. A song beneath the static. A low, terrible song that the sea itself seems to sing. It makes the stones of this tower tremble. The radio is not receiving a signal. I fear it is translating a presence. November 12th, 1923. This is the night from the historical record. The night the Siren's Lament went down. Abernathy's final entry was a frantic, barely legible scrawl. The light. God forgive me. The light is the problem. It doesn't warn them away. It draws it closer. The call isn't for help. It's a warning. There's something in the water. It answers the light. It's hungry. It's not the ship they fear. The entry ended there. The official record stated that Thomas Abernathy was lost the following week, presumed swept from the rocks during a storm. His body was never found. I slammed the book shut, a new, more profound terror seizing me. We had it all wrong. The Siren's Lament wasn't haunting this place. It was warning it. The distress call wasn't the horror. It was the prelude. The light, my beautiful, life-saving light, was a lure. That night, the worst storm in a decade hit the Serpent's tooth. The wind shrieked like a banshee, and waves, colossal and black, exploded against the tower, making the ancient stone shudder to its foundations. Rain lashed the lantern glass with the force of thrown gravel. Halfway through the night, with a deafening crack, the generator died. The main light went out, plunging me into a terrifying primal darkness, broken only by flashes of lightning that revealed a churning white apocalypse outside. The emergency batteries for the radio kicked in automatically. The Marconi set hummed to life, and the call came. Mayday. M-A-Y-D-A-Y. We are a quarter mile from the light. We can see the tower. The fog is lifting. Oh God. Dear God, that's not a reef. It's not rocks. The captain's voice was a raw scream of pure, unadulterated terror. The background noise of shouting men and groaning metal was replaced by a wet, tearing sound, and the deep, resonant thrumming I'd heard before, now magnified, guttural, and impossibly close. It's aboard. It's The voice cut out, replaced by a sound that will haunt my nightmares until the day I die. It was a high-pitched clicking shriek, like 1,000 pieces of chitin scraping together, followed by the sickening crunch of bone and the final, deep, resonant thrum of satisfaction. Then, silence from the radio, but not from outside. Over the howl of the wind, I heard a new sound, a heavy, wet, scraping noise. It was coming from the base of the tower. It was the sound of something immense and heavy dragging itself out of the water and onto the rocks. It was the sound of something climbing. Scrape, drag, scrape, drag. With a strangled cry, I scrambled up the final few steps into the lantern room. Lightning split the sky, and in that fleeting, stark illumination, I looked down. The sea was a maelstrom, but the fog, as the captain had screamed, was gone. There was no ghost ship. There was no ship at all. Instead, wrapping itself around the base of my tower was something. It was not a creature of any known biology. Its form was vast and amorphous, a glistening, oily black that seemed to drink the lightning. It was vaguely cetacean, but its skin was studded with dozens of pale, milky white lights that pulsed in unison with the hideous thrumming sound that now vibrated through the floor beneath my feet. Two immense, crab-like limbs, impossibly long and jointed, were finding purchase on the stonework, pulling its colossal bulk upwards. The scraping sound was the serrated edges of its carapace digging into the granite. It was using the lighthouse as a tree, and I was the frightened bird in the nest. I finally understood Abernathy's last entry. The lighthouse was an anglerfish. My beam, a beacon of hope for sailors, was a lure for this thing from the abyssal depths. The Siren's Lament hadn't hit a reef. It had been ambushed. It had been eaten. And for 100 years, their dying screams had been trapped in this place, a psychic echo trying to warn the next lure, the next keeper. Scrape, drag. It was halfway up the tower. One of its pale, dead lights, the size of a dinner plate, swiveled and seemed to fix on me through the glass. My mind, stretched taut with terror, snapped. There was only one thought, one insane, desperate act of defiance. The lure. I had to destroy the lure. I grabbed a heavy iron fire poker from its stand near the door. With a scream that was part terror, part rage, I turned to the heart of the lighthouse, the magnificent, million-faceted Fresnel lens. It had been my pride, my responsibility. Now it was my curse. I swung the poker. The first blow created a spiderweb of cracks with a sound like shattering ice. The second strike, fueled by adrenaline, sent a shower of thick, priceless glass cascading onto the floor. I didn't stop. I hammered at it again and again, a madman destroying his own god, shattering the crystal eye that had called the monster from the deep. The scraping stopped. The thrumming ceased. I stood panting in the near-total darkness, my chest heaving, the poker hanging limp in my hand. The only sound was the storm and my own ragged breathing. I waited. For an eternity, I waited for the crash of the glass, the sound of the creature breaking into my sanctuary. But it never came. After a long, agonizing moment, I heard a tremendous, deep sigh, and then the sound of something immensely heavy sliding back down the tower and into the churning sea. I had put out the light, and it had lost interest. They found me 3 days later. The storm had passed, and the Coast Guard had come to investigate the communication silence and the extinguished light. They found me in the lantern room, huddled amidst the wreckage of the lens, muttering about a song in the water and a ship that was never there. The official story is lighthouse madness, a well-documented psychological phenomenon where keepers in extreme isolation suffer breaks from reality. They said I had hallucinated everything and, in a fit of psychosis, destroyed a priceless piece of maritime history. My secret logbook was dismissed as the ravings of a disturbed mind. So now I reside in a different kind of quiet, one with padded walls and soft-spoken doctors who nod sympathetically and increase my medication. My new home is clean, sterile, and safe. There are no storms here, no fog. Last night, I was sitting in the common room. A news program was playing on the television mounted high on the wall. It was a local interest piece. A cheerful reporter was interviewing a bright-eyed young man, the new keeper of the Serpent's tooth. They'd already installed a new, modern, fully automated LED lamp. "It's a great responsibility," the young man said, smiling. "People depend on that light. It's a symbol of safety, cutting through the darkest nights." The camera panned away from him, showing a beautiful, sweeping shot of the restored lighthouse. A fresh bank of evening fog was just beginning to roll in from the sea, softening the edges of the tower. Its new, brilliant white beams sliced through the gathering gloom. It looked beautiful, perfect. And then, from the tinny speakers of the television set, I heard it, faint, almost imperceptible beneath the reporter's cheerful sign-off. But I heard it, a crackle of static, and the faint, terrified whisper of a man dead for 100 years. Mayday. The cycle was beginning again. I hadn't stopped it. I'd only delayed it. I opened my mouth to scream a warning, but no sound came out. No one here would listen anyway. Out there, across the water, the light is shining. And in the deep, something ancient and hungry is stirring, drawn to the promise of the beautiful, terrible light.